and I want to welcome you to the Engaged Employee Podcast. Our mission is to emphasize the relationship between the employee and the workplace with the goal of enhancing engagement levels to create a more productive and satisfying work environment. While many organizations strive to create a more engaging atmosphere, they often miss the mark by forcing connection with big team building events like axe throwing or escape rooms. Those activities only leave employees with a short-lived sense of belonging. Organizations may also try smaller and more suffocating events like happy hours or group birthday celebrations that their employees feel obligated to attend. As a social connections and business culture coach, I've found that to create a stable, engaged, and productive workforce, there needs to be a shift in focus from mandatory fun and manufactured connection towards building trust and authentic conversation. Join me and a guest as we dive into social wellness strategies for the individual employee, techniques for developing interpersonal relationships with coworkers, and even some approaches for leaders to enrich the overall organizational culture. The Engaged Employee Podcast starts now. Hey there, my name is Coach Lee, and welcome to the Engaged Employee Podcast. My guest today is Mark Iorio. Mark is an executive with a demonstrated track record of running successful businesses over the past 35 years. With a focus on aligning an organization's people and purpose, he has run nonprofits, served on multiple committees and boards, and even ran a successful privately held business. Through his company, Brand and Culture Alignment Technology, he helps organizations find their North Star, build the communication gap between managers and leaders, dispel cultural myths, and share skills for improving team culture. Our conversation today will be focused on wellness for the employee, for the company at large. Please welcome Mark to the Engaged Employee Podcast.
Thanks, Coach Lee. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you. I am very excited to learn from you because you have been doing this for almost as long as I've been alive. And that means you have a wealth of experience and knowledge, just as I said. So I wonder, how did you get into this? Because, it's not this wellness for the company at large, because it's not something that I think people in the previous generations even thought about.
Mm. Your lead in the video that you had was perfect because a lot of times organizations think that perks like axe throwing and social events are really what drives culture. And you want to know how I got into this? I had a marketing communications company that I started in 1987. And in around 2000 or so, we were called in by AAA Mid-Atlantic, which was in Philadelphia. They were in Center City, Philadelphia, and the managing director of marketing called us in to take a look at their internal brand. And back then, in 2000, we really didn't know much about internal branding and what it meant. Well, it was a metaphor for culture inside an organization. And so we embarked on a real lifelong learning process as to how the best companies in the world delivered on a brand promise. And so we developed our own methodology of proprietary methodology of getting teams to work together in a more collaborative way and break down those silos and the passive aggressive behavior, become more engaged in the work that they do each and every day. So that's been we've been doing that for the last 2+ decades.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's like the idea of having it be internal branding is probably why we missed it. Today we call it something a little different, and we focus on this employee engagement more so than internal branding. It's just a whole different way to think about it with different challenges added to it.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. Engagement is really about people who feel as though they're a part of something, that feel like their teams have their back, their employees have they're in a team that where everyone's rowing in the same direction or singing from the same sheet of music, and
Hmm.
they feel like there's a purpose to their work when they go into work and not just a number. There's a lot to it, and you're right, Coach Lee. I think 25, 30 years ago, that wasn't the norm. It just over the last decade or so become much more in the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially because of the pandemic as well. I'd be curious to know, how do you help organizations with this problem? What do they hire you to handle?
Well, they usually come to us with an alignment problem. They feel as though their culture and their brand promise are not aligned with one another, and or there's some aggressiveness going on inside the organization, or some, overall toxicity. What we do is we come into every single organization, and we have a proprietary tool that we use, that we designed and developed, and in each case, we ask every individual who takes the survey. It's only 15 minutes and it's online. You cannot have a wrong answer. We ask every person in the organization to imagine or visualize their entire team as though it were a single person doing its best work on its best day to deliver all of its promises and achieve all of its goals. We ask, what does that look like? And in our survey instrument, there are about 80 or so exercises that are adjectives that best describe that role target. It's kind of like the role models in our lives when we were growing up, the people that we emulated, that we started to behave like them. If you start to imagine your team or your organization as though it were a person, personifying that team, you can begin to emulate the behavior of that organization on a daily basis. So they take the survey, we plot it on our four-factor model. The four factors are teams that are more innovative, outside the box thinking, creative; teams that are more resolute or driven; uh, teams that are more expert and analytical and data driven; or teams that are more about caretaker or harmony and following the rules and treating people fairly and justly, but also uh, adhering to guidelines. And wherever they land on that quadrant, we plot it, and then we take an average of where everyone landed, and we begin that process with a series of workshops as to where they aspire to go, what they aspire to become. And what falls out of that, Coach Lee, are a series of alignments and attributes that they all believe in, and they line up with where that organizational North Star is going. Um, and we take it from there. We build a list of commandments or aligned inspirations, which are behaviors in the organization,
Hmm.
and we pass that around to everyone, and we ask them to write out a commitment, a contribution that they can make that helps migrate the culture of the organization toward its North Star. That
Right.
helps. That helps with engagement because people start to work together.
Absolutely. I can see right there how I can take responsibility and ownership of my role. I know exactly how it impacts the rest of the team in the mission. I know that I am the fingers that move, that connect to the hand that picks up the object, that helps us be successful. And essentially, I understand my role. And that's a really great way of understanding my strengths and putting me in the right position.
Exactly. Yeah. And in it on that form, we also add on the left side of the column a couple of check boxes that relate specifically to the aligned inspirations. In other words, what part of these behaviors am I impacting? And then at the bottom, name an accountability partner, Coach Lee. If it's you and I working together, it's not in a punitive way, but you and I meet on a regular basis, maybe once or twice a week. And I say to you, Coach Lee, am I doing the things on my promise, or as part of my promise, that I committed to doing? It's an integrity thing. And
Hmm.
you can say to me, Mark, I've seen you do some things that are in alignment with that, and other areas where I might be able to help you get to your goal. And that process goes on and on. And you know better than
Hmm.
anyone that behavioral change takes time.
It does. It certainly does. And having someone remind you, because it's so easy to go back into the patterns, the behaviors that we had before. That groove is already set. And so it takes real intention to move out of it. And having a buddy to help you do that is, I think, is really very, very important to be able to do that. I'd be curious to know what kind of companies can use this kind of innovation, because I think all companies can, but I'd be curious to know which companies really, really do well with this.
That's the $1 million question. So
Right?
you're right. You're right. It can be used by every single company out there. We love working with. We work with nonprofits. We work with manufacturing facilities. We work with organizations like HVAC companies and research companies, hospital systems. But we really have a very broad and eclectic clientele, but we have to also be careful that we're not selling to everyone. We know that there's lots and lots of companies who really need uh, employees to be more engaged in the work that they do. We're going to be teaming up with pretty large organizations in the near future that recognize that just talking about culture is not good enough. We talk about connecting the head, the intellect, the heart, the emotion, and the hands. Without those three, it's going to be very, very difficult to uh, make any behavioral changes within the organization that are going to be impactful. So, to answer your question, Coach Lee, I think it's pretty much everyone who is out there that needs the help. We prefer working with companies that are between about 10 employees to about 150 employees.
Mhm.
They're a lot more manageable and across the board in terms of the industries that they're in.
Yeah, I think there's also a high degree of accountability that happens when you have smaller, more intentional teams as
Yeah.
well. So it really would make this work a lot better. Not saying it can't with bigger companies, as you said, you're working towards that. And I understand, to switch gears just a little bit, that you want to really get the message out to people, even if you're not working with them. This idea of organizational health is something that you're very passionate about. I know I flashed your YouTube channel. I saw your YouTube channel. You talk about it there, and you also talk about it on your TV show, The Rainmakers Roundup. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. Yeah, I think organizational health and wellness inside the company is just so paramount in what we do every day. And, there's no greater satisfaction or feeling level of gratitude when people come up to you and say, "This is changing me, changing my life." It's something that the BCAT process has done for not only our company here, but for me. And I've been doing a lot more speaking about team building and culture because I've heard so many companies and organizations, Coach Lee, go out and talk about culture. But as you said in your opening video, they're really not doing much about the changes that need to take place within the organization, behavioral changes that need to take place, and those things that help people's wellness and mental health. And so we talk a lot about that. And then, of course, on my TV show, the Rainmakers Roundup, what I'm looking for are people that are really competitive businesses that are doing something a little unique in the world of culture, especially inside their organizations. And it's pretty remarkable the things that people do, and it's also pretty remarkable when you speak to larger companies and what they're not doing and what they say they're doing. And a lot of times, I hate to say this, but it seems like it's a little bit more window dressing for some of these organizations that say that they're trying to do some things in culture and team building, and they really don't follow through. Look, assessments and surveys, and those pizza parties and Taco Tuesdays and paintball and so on are a lot of fun, and we would never ever say that they're not worthwhile or worth doing. It's just that when you're talking about cultural change and team building inside organizations, it takes quite an effort. There has to be persistence and consistency there. Otherwise, it's never going to happen. So it's a lifelong journey, my friend.
Here, here. I love that you said that. I mean, don't go away from the fun things that we do together that really brings us together. Have the Taco Tuesdays, have the pizza. Let's do something together to show that we're having fun at work. I know that humans really bond over joyful events, joyful things.
Yeah,
But I think the biggest problem is that it's a one and done kind of thing, or it's every once in a while. And then I go back to the uncomfortable disconnection that it is to sit next to my coworker and talk about nothing, or to not trust them and not be supported by them or feel supported overall. So, I mean, I really like what you're saying here about making sure the company really addresses those things that happen on a day-to-day basis, with
thank
the
you.
accountability, the conversations with others, the personal responsibility of success here at the company, because I think we want that. I know that when I worked at a company, I really wanted that too. I wanted to do a good job, and I wanted to know how I was doing a good job, but also like kind of fit into the culture.
Yeah. We have a mantra here, Coach Lee, that says, make your best day your every day. Make your best day your every day.
Hmm.
And so if people can begin to, share some of the things that they aspire to become, the commitments that they want to make them, that makes them a better version of themselves each day, which in turn helps the organization become a better version of itself. I don't think you can ask for much more than that. And I think that's really what helps, as you said, it helps break down those barriers. Instead of feeling uncomfortable or awkward next to one of your coworkers, you're having conversations that are meaningful, that help break down those barriers and those silos within organizations. It happens all too often.
Absolutely. So, with that said, Mark, you've given us some great information, and I'm sure my listeners and people who are watching are going to want to follow up with you. So, how can they find you?
Well, a couple of ways. I am on LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. Just look me up on Mark Iorio, and there's a number of us, but I'm probably the only person in there that talks about brand and culture alignment. The other way is I have a YouTube channel, which you can go on. It's at Mark Iorio 5555. Listen, don't ask me how I got
I was
that.
going to ask you, how
It
did you
it
get?
showed up. 5 is not my lucky number. It was 7 when I was growing up playing baseball. But you can look on that, and certainly on getbcat.com, Coach Lee. That's the website. We are revamping it. Be patient with us. It's not bad right now, but it will get a lot better. And so, we can you can always find me there. So I appreciate your time so much today, and I'm grateful
Absolutely.
for being on your program.
Yeah, and he also has an Instagram as well. You can go ahead and stalk him and see some wonderful pictures of him and his wife as well. It's really nice.
Thanks.
And then don't forget about the Rainmakers Roundup TV show. Check that out for sure. And all this stuff will be in the show notes as well. Mark, want to thank you so much for your time, and I learned so much from you in this short amount of time. I would love to have another conversation with you again.
It would
But
be my
until
pleasure, Coach Lee. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
You too.
And there you have it, another insightful episode of the Engaged Employee Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the world of employee engagement, leadership, and workplace dynamics. The Engaged Employee Podcast is brought to you by the Patterns of Possibility, where we help people make more meaningful relationships in both their personal and professional life. Before we wrap up, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our incredible guests and, of course, our loyal listeners. Your support keeps us motivated to bring you valuable content each week. If you found today's discussion thought-provoking and want to learn more about how we can help you or your organization make more meaningful relationships, go to patternsofpossibility.com and book a friendly conversation with me. Or you can email me your questions at patternsofpossibility@gmail.com. Stay connected with us and engage with fellow listeners by following the Patterns of Possibility on LinkedIn. You can also catch us on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell to stay in the loop. And if you prefer the audio version, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your support means the world to us, and by subscribing, you'll never miss an episode. Thank you for being a part of our journey to create workplaces where passion meets productivity. Until next time, I'm Coach Lee. Stay engaged, stay inspired.